All right, we are once again welcoming Fern Halper on to Speaking of Data. How are you today, Fern? Thank you for joining us.
I'm good, Andrew. How are you?
Doing very well. Doing very well. Excited to talk about the data mesh, which is, of course, has been a hot topic as far as I can tell for some time now. So we're going to jump right into the questions here, um, as people are already familiar with you on our podcast. So I don't need to go into a whole long introduction any longer. You'll be seeing more of Fern as the podcast extends itself as well. So let's get right into it. What is a data mesh, and why is it such a hot topic?
So I get, the notion of a data mesh, it's been gaining interest in the market for the past couple of years. And the idea was actually introduced in 2019 by Zhamak Dehghani. And when she introduced the idea, she said that the data mesh isn't an architecture. I think a lot of people think of it that way, but she actually introduced it as what she called a socio-technical paradigm. And she said that that socio-technical paradigm was recognizing the interactions between people and the technical architectures that they have and the solutions, in their organizations. So really what she was talking about was a framework or a way of thinking. And when she introduced this framework, she said it had four pillars. And those four pillars were, the first was that it was domain-oriented ownership. So she said businesses actually own their data, and these, she was talking about, these were business domains, and that these business domains actually own their own data. And so when you think about it, that means that the ownership was decentralized. And her idea was that this should scale out data sharing because the domains were going to actually share data across organizational boundaries. So if you have a business domain, it owns its data, but it's going to share the data across other domains. And that filtered into the second pillar, which was this idea of data as a product. So we've been hearing more about data as a product and data products, but she was talking about the idea that data is accessible to those who need it and that it's viewed as a product. And so if it's viewed as a product, that means that the customers of the product, right, the people in the domains or in other domains, that they should actually be satisfied with the product, and that the company should actually be organized to support a product view of the data. And so if you think about a product, right, people need to be satisfied with it. So in the case of data, that means that these data as a product, has to have high quality, it has to be understandable, it has to be interoperable. So the domains serving up this data have to serve up a high quality product. So the third pillar is around self-service. And so her thought is that self-service was actually going to be used to empower teams. And so multiple personas actually can make use of this platform to get at this data that these domains are serving up. And those personas don't just have to be data scientists or business analysts. They can also be, people like business users. And then the fourth pillar is around federated governance. So in the data mesh, the governance is based on a federated model where there's going to be team members from different business domains as part of the effort. So that model is going to balance the autonomy of the domains, with the need for compliance and interoperability and security of the mesh. So, I think she painted a good picture of sort of this mesh, with this domain-oriented leadership, the view of data as a product that you can self-serve, but with federated governance. And you asked, why is it being talked about? And I think that one of the main reasons why it's being talked about is because we're in this really complex data ecosystem. So organizations are trying to manage data across different environments, different data types. They're trying to utilize analytics, but they're struggling with trusting the data, with getting it out there and being for people across their organizations to access and so on. So I think it came about because of all of this complexity.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think the differentiation between an architecture and a paradigm, I think, is very, very intriguing and a little over my head, to be honest with you. But I think you did a great job of explaining it. So, uh, with that, are you seeing the data mesh being adopted by different companies, organizations?
Yeah, I guess in our research, it's not being widely adopted yet. So last year we did a survey and we asked whether, so this was in sort of mid 2022, and we asked the respondents whether their organization was using a data mesh, and we defined the data mesh shorter than what I just said, but we defined it. And less than 15% said that they were using a mesh. And then 18% said that they plan to move to that paradigm. And then about a third said no, but they agree with the principles. I mean, that's what we see a lot, that people agree with the principles. And then a third said that they have no plans. So really it was sort of like a third, a third, a third. So a third saying yes, a third saying no, but they like the principles, especially when we talk to CDOs, they seem to like the principles around federated governance, because they like the idea of maybe them, the CDO, actually being the hub of the data governance, but with all of these domains, that it's a loosely coupled sort of federated governance that they can coordinate. So they like the principles. I think a lot of people also like the principles of data as a product, because we're hearing a lot more from organizations using, putting together data as a product. And then so a third said no. So, I think there's some sort of evolution to some of the principles. We'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah. So the third that said yes, and that they're using it or interested in using it, what is it about it, the data mesh, that makes it appealing? Why would they want it? What are the opportunities?
They like the idea, that they like the idea that if the domains own the data, then theoretically the business should get easier access to the data. And if the data is a product, then there should be simpler access, and it's self-service, that should help too. So they think that it's going to simplify data access. This is what we're hearing from people. Also, they're saying that it can streamline the data to get quicker results. If the domains own the data, then they should be able to streamline the processing of the data and give it to the users. If they don't need to ask IT for the data all of the time or wait until IT gives them access. So that's, some people like that idea, which may or may not, be implemented. But some people like the idea that even though it may take time to get the business to integrate the building and delivering of their own data as a product to the organization, that when they did it, that what immediately became apparent to them was that there was an improvement of data literacy and improved information. So even though it took some time, the result was that data literacy was improved because the data was in the domains and it was the product that the business people got involved with, since they owned, that product, and that drove the business decision making. So they were part and parcel sort of the data from the start. Other people like the idea that it's going to have all the units participate in data sharing. So this notion of each domain owning the data and then sharing it, because then if everyone's participating, and they're sharing their data, that sort of gets away from these data silos that have plagued businesses for so long. So they like that also. So, those are some of the reasons, aside from what I mentioned with the CDOs, liking that we've heard from people actually talking about the data fabric.
Is the data mesh really only for companies that are dealing with massive amounts of data? It feels like it might be, right? If you're not necessarily dealing with huge mass amounts of data, is this something that you would still even want to use or implement?
That's a good question. I think that's probably right. It was developed because of the complexity, the large, which is also, due to large amounts of data, all across the company. So my guess is, if you, had 10 gigabytes of data, that may not be sort of thinking about a data
Right.
map. Could be wrong, but
Yeah.
that would be my take.
Okay. So we heard why the 33% of the people might want the data mesh. What about the other third that are saying no? What would be the challenges? Why would they want to avoid potentially using this?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons. Some of them say that they don't understand it at all. They think it's an esoteric concept that's hard to understand. They think that even though the idea is that you're going to share data, um, and that could be an opportunity, some people actually think that it's a challenge because they think that the domains won't share their data. And so they own the data, but they're not going to share it. So if
Hmm.
they don't share it, then there's little value, and it should have been in IT or someplace else, in the first place. And, then at least you had a chance at getting at the data, and then some people think that if you're, if the data is decentralized, because we said that it's owned by these domains, then that's going to cause a problem with governance. A lot of people think that it's going to make governance harder
Hmm.
because so not thinking what the CDOs are thinking that I just mentioned, that, oh, we can actually try to coordinate governance. They just think that if it's decentralized, there's not going to, that governance won't happen. They're also concerned about change management. Um, some people just believe in a central organization that's that's has one single version of the truth, that's managed by the data people, that's their belief system.
Hmm.
And they think that some people think that getting people on the same page and, to understand the value of this is going to be hard. Um, some people think that not everyone in the organization is data oriented. So why have a data mesh? Other concerns, organizational concerns are also around things like it's removing jobs. That's a big concern. If the data and analytics moves to the domains, what happens to the people who are in maybe a centralized organization that was dealing with the data? Do they lose their jobs? Did they go to the domains? What if there's some big reorganization? That's going to drive costs, which was another concern, that this whole model might be error prone
Hmm.
and inefficient, because it's hard to share data that way, and the businesses don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's so. I mean, there's a lot of concerns, or maybe it's more questions than
Hmm.
concerns. Um, but that's what some people have told us.
Sure. Yeah. It feels like it makes a lot of sense for some folks to jump right into the deep end and see if they can swim in reference to the data mesh, and for others to just wait and see. I do think that's kind of a natural curve to any new cutting edge type of technology in any realm. But is there a way for organizations to use a data mesh in just a portion of their organization, or is it something like where you have to use all or none?
I don't know, but I don't think that you have to use all or none. I imagine that you could start somewhere, with,
Hmm.
it depends how you're organized initially, I would think, if everything's centralized initially, um, and you decide that you're going to move to a data mesh, then would you possibly move some of some data into some domains and start there? Like it's going to depend,
Hmm.
on who and what your organization is capable of, I think, and you may just, like what some organizations are doing, you may just actually deal with some of the principles. You like the idea of data products, great. Have some of the domains start offering data, I should say data as a product,
Hmm.
um, to other domains. So there's also the architecture to think about. We said this was a paradigm, but there's also sort of the architecture and how that would even look.
Hmm.
So it, there's a lot of considerations, I think, before you do that. But I do think you can start to do some of the principles of it, even if you don't, move whole scale. I mean, certainly if your organization just started to centralize its data, like you moved to some sort of cloud platform, and then all of a sudden someone comes along and says, we're going to implement a data mesh and put all these domains, in place, and that may not make sense for your organizational model now. So, I think it's a matter of weighing the costs versus the benefits and where your organization is now, so moving from that centralized to a decentralized model, may make sense for organizations with multiple business units, but it can be difficult for others. So it's something to start thinking about and picking out, I think, what the best pieces are.
Yeah. I'll ask you a last question here, and it's a best guess is what I'm hoping for in response. A year from now, in your estimation, do you think it'll be roughly the same, where a third of folks are using the data mesh and a third are not, and a third are planning to, or do you think it might change those percentages?
I think it's going to be the same. I think that change, doesn't happen that quickly. So, we may see more organizations using some of the principles, especially because we're seeing a lot of activity around sort of this notion of data as a product and data products. So, that aspect of it, may make more people, if we ask the same question, say that they're interested in the principles of it. But, you think about it, you got to think about, like I said, weighing the cost versus the benefits. You have to think about the new roles that you're going to have. If each of the domains is thinking about data as a product, then a lot of them may be considering data product managers, right? Like you think of a product manager and then think of a data product manager, right? That's not necessarily a role that's there. Although, interestingly, what we're seeing is that companies are putting dollars behind data as a product, and even data products. I was just looking at some of our data from our teams survey, and some of the highest budgets or increases, I should say, are in these like data product areas, which is really interesting. So, to the extent that you can tie that to the data mesh and not, just trying to get more value out of your data, then we may see more people saying, oh yeah, we're using a lot of the principles there. But, you're also going to have to do things like evaluate skills and assess the organizational models. Like when we talk to CDOs around their organizational models, I was talking about, this notion of a data office, and they like the fact that they could have this data office that coordinates this federated governance, which is part of the data mesh idea, but when they're thinking of it, they're thinking of like a hub and spoke maybe kind of model where there's like a central data office, and that's the hub, and then the spokes are actually the domains, but yet the data mesh is a decentralized model, but except in that instance. So I just think that there's a lot to think through.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a lot might be changing. People might be, adopting it or even making their own tweaks to it in the coming months and years. So
that's a good point. Yeah, because when we were at one of our executive summits, there was a woman on one of our panels who was talking about their data mesh, and she was really like, they were adopting it for they were picking and choosing what worked, and they were getting, their model to work that way for their own use case. And it was successful for them.
Yeah, like the data mesh buffet. I'm not going to coin that term here, but pick and choose what you want. So
yeah, there are valuable parts to it.
Definitely. Okay, well, Fern, thank you so much for your time again today. Really enjoyed talking with you, and I think this has been, at least for me, a very enlightening conversation. I've been so confused by the data mesh, so it certainly helped me clear it up in my own head, and I'm sure the audience feels the same way. So thanks again for your time today, Fern, and of course, you'll be coming back soon, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Andrew.